queue open.
Callan, check your spot.
Camera 4, check your focus.
Carol, make sure the phone guests are standing by. Okay, Don, we're ready out here.
Okay, thanks. Let's rock and roll. Count them in.
10, 9,
Here we go.
8,
Flying graphic.
7,
Camera 2, I'm going to be coming to you
5,
first. Stand by to cue mark.
4, 3, 2.
And cue mark.
There's a situation going on up in New Jersey with a woman named Gerald Turco. And, you know, this goes back to what we were saying earlier today and a minute ago about how they don't want to engage anymore. They can't defend their position, so now they're just going to try to shut us down. And this is going on up in New Jersey. We're seeing this all over the country, by the way. But there's a big case up in New Jersey. The lady who's involved in this was not available for the show, but her attorney was. Frank Manion from the American Center for Law and Justice joins us from Louisville, Kentucky. Hello, Frank.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
I'm just fine, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Pleasure.
Give the audience just a quick thumbnail analysis of what's going on up here with this lady.
Sure. Well, Gerald Turco is one, just like thousands and thousands of other sidewalk counselors who over the years have taken a stand literally and figuratively outside of abortion facilities in order to help the women, talk them out of what they're about to do to their child. And in some cases, they're there when they come out to offer them assistance, help, spiritual, physical, material, whatever it is they need to deal with the consequences of what they've done. And as you know, throughout the years in various places and in various ways, the owners of the clinics or the mills want to shut this kind of free speech down, speaking of free speech. And one of the ways they do it is by enacting these so-called buffer zone laws. In New Jersey, in Englewood, New Jersey, there's an abortion mill that's been around forever, notorious, named Metropolitan Medical Associates. And Gerald Turco is one of those people who goes out there Saturday morning, sometimes during the week, to Sidewalk Counsel. And in 2014, the city of Englewood enacted a buffer zone modeled on the one in Massachusetts that ultimately ended up being struck down by the Supreme Court, that in effect keeps pro-lifers of any kind, not just sidewalk counselors, but protesters as well, away from the entire front of the building. So whereas before they were able to walk next to and accompany women right up to the door of the building and try to persuade them to change their minds, offer them help, now they're not allowed to do that. And if they should dare to cross one of these buffer zone lines, they're subjected to a minimum fine of $1,000, plus the potential for 90 days in jail. And this would be for every violation. So every day they're out there, these fines, potential jail sentences would accumulate. So that's the law that we've challenged. We filed suit in federal court in Newark, New Jersey, and we're just kind of getting off the ground here. But we plan to stay with this all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to.
You know, let me ask you this question, and this is obviously just a theoretical question. Let's just say you're in a state that's pretty heavily pro-union.
Right.
This wouldn't happen in a state like Texas, for example, but you're in a state that's pretty heavily pro-union. What if they said that this buffer zone would apply if let's say these clinic workers in that abortion mill were to unionize,
right,
and then they were going to have some sort of work stoppage or some sort of action against that abortion clinic? What would happen if the state said, okay, you can do that, but you can't come within a certain number of feet of the abortion clinic while you do this?
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting and would never happen because of the political clout of the union, I'm sure. And really, this whole thing is about political clout and the squeaky wheel, because this law was pushed in Englewood by North Jersey chapter of the National Organization for Women. The local people saw no need for it. The chief of police testified against it in front of the city council and said, we don't need this out there. Yeah, there's times when the crowd gets kind of, not out of control, but loud, and there's occasionally some jostling and pushing maybe between the escorts and the pro-lifers. But we have existing laws that cover any actual violations, any actual obstructions or assaults, which apparently have never happened because there's never been a prosecution for one. And so Yeah, but now has a lot of clout in New Jersey, particularly in that part of the state, and they got this thing pushed through. They were able to point to the Massachusetts law, but what happened in the interim was the Massachusetts law was struck down by the Supreme Court last summer. So we're really, what our case is I think probably the first attempt to apply that Supreme Court decision in the McCullen case on a case-by-case basis around the country and to challenge these ridiculous buffer zone laws.
It's really unbelievable when you think about it. But again, I mean, obviously you know how to litigate your case. I'm not an attorney. I would make that argument, though, about the unions.
Oh, yeah.
If you're in a heavily union state like New Jersey is, like I said, it's not like you're trying this in Texas.
Right.
But in a heavily union state like New Jersey, I would make that argument. Say, would unions be prohibited from approaching a certain, could a business, let's say that you've got a GM assembly plant there, could they say, we want a 500-foot buffer zone?
No, and traditionally, as we all know, things sometimes happen where there's a union picketing or union on strike in front of a business, and the owner of the business does have some legal recourse, but it's not a buffer zone. What it is an injunction against particularly, egregious acts such as pushing and shoving or actual violence. You can do that if you can show a record that these things are occurring, but you can't shut down speech entirely, either for a union or for a sidewalk counselor. That's just a basic principle of First Amendment law. And, thankfully, last summer, the Supreme Court in the McCullen case recognized this. I mean, that was a 9-0 opinion. Every justice signed on to that opinion saying that the Massachusetts law, which is pretty much identical to the one we're challenging, goes too far in regulating speech in a public sidewalk. So we're hopeful that we'll get a similar result here.
Now, are you guys seeing other cases? Are you going to be involved in other cases like this? Because as you know, as you alluded to earlier, that's just one of, we're seeing this all over the country.
Right.
Are you going to get involved in
and the problem is the Supreme Court decision in McCullen. I guess in order to get a 9-justice unanimous decision, Justice Roberts kind of, in our opinion, had to water down the basis of his decision. Alito and Scalia were not all that happy with it, although they signed on to it. So the decision is on a very broad, or actually a very narrow basis, that this was not the least restrictive way for Massachusetts to go about dealing with the problem. And they gave some examples of other ways that towns could deal with disruptions, obstructions outside of abortion clinics. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see places at the instigation of a NOW or a NARAW or the local pro-choice loudmouths to try and enact similar laws, and we're more than willing to go and challenge them wherever they pop up.
Well, good. I'm glad. We've got to have organizations like ACLJ and
Absolutely.
Alliance Defending Freedom and the others that are out there, because the pro-lifers, if you think about it for a minute, for the first 20 years or so, we really didn't do that.
Right.
We just kind of took whatever the state tried to give.
That's right.
And you look back at the early days of Operation Rescue, for example,
Right.
and where they're filing these motion in limine case charges. Motions against rescuers,
Right.
just to get rid of the cases. That's the only reason they're doing that. And there was, I'll give you a good example of this, Frank. And did you defend any of the rescuers were you around at that time?
Oh yeah. Hundreds.
All right. I'll give you an example of something we had here. We had a young lady, one of my first employees when I first started Life Dynamics. She had rescued in Dallas. Now, rescuers knew they were going to be arrested, and they knew there were consequences for doing civil disobedience. That's the nature of civil disobedience. You're saying, I'm willing to take the consequences. When her trial came up, they filed a motion in limine against her, which means the prosecution asked the judge to rule that she couldn't use certain words in her defense.
Right.
And they literally gave her a list of 28 words that she couldn't use in her defense.
Yeah.
I remember a few of them. Abortion was one, baby,
Right.
child,
Yeah,
killing,
incredible.
murder, just go down the line. They gave her
Right.
28 words that she could not use in her defense.
Yeah.
Now, when the trial then started, the judge approved this motion in limine. When the trial started, what can she say, right? So she sits there, and they find her guilty in this courtroom in Dallas. They find her guilty. They give her 2 years for obstruction of this front door of this abortion clinic. They give her 2 years in jail, and then they suspend the sentence.
Right.
All right, trial's over. Well, she's livid, of course, about this motion in limine. And she asking her attorney, can they really do this? He said, well, they did do it. He said, but it is the basis for an appeal.
Right.
They will let you can appeal this, and you will win at the appellate level on this, and you'll get a new trial. But in the new trial, they're not going to grant you, they're going to find you guilty again. But they're not going to grant you probation, and you're going to go to the state penitentiary for 2 years. Now, she's a 28-year-old woman with 2 children. And she says, so now they put me in a position where I can't have a trial, and I can't appeal. I can't afford to take the risk of appeal. So she just had to accept it. And that's how they were getting rid of all these cases.
Right.
All right. I mean, what does it say about the other side? And this goes along with what you were talking about before this. Calling an unborn child a pregnancy. What does it say about the other side when they cannot tolerate? They cannot tolerate even speech, honest, factual speech about what they do. I mean, do they ever think about that? They can't even listen to honest facts about what it is that they're all about. I mean, to me, that kind of says it all.
Yeah, Frank,
that's
that's
what
such
all these cases are about at the bottom, free speech cases.
That's such an important observation, Frank, and I saw it recently in Kansas. I was out in Kansas with Governor Brownback for one of the signings, bill signings for this law now protecting children from dismemberment abortions. And when it was being debated in the Kansas Senate, the lone 2 senators who spoke up in opposition to this law, they couldn't even say the name of the bill that they were opposing. It's so ridiculous. I mean, you get up, you say the name of the bill. The reason they couldn't say it was that the name of the bill includes the word dismemberment.
Right.
So they just can't come.
And that's what all of these free speech cases are about when it comes to abortion. The other side cannot deal with it. They cannot deal with it. I mean, our client in this case, Gerald Turco, is the most mild-mannered, peaceful, loving person who I've seen her in action out there, and she just tries to approach these women who are obviously in a horrible state of anxiety, fear, everything else, and speak to them lovingly. And the people that own the building can't deal with that. They've got to surround the woman with the death squirts who start screaming all sorts of nonsense, and they have to go and get a law enacted to keep Gerald and people like Gerald even further away so that they really can't get near these women.
Well, they cannot
tolerate the truth.
They cannot handle dissent. You're supposed to just blindly accept.
Right.
And Renee, we've talked about before about the number of women that you and I talked to that call in here who are post-aborted, and how many of them will tell you, I was sitting in that waiting room hoping something would happen.
Right.
That somebody would come in and say, hey, it's okay for you to get up and leave, or somebody would give me some information. You know what?
Yeah.
Not only do we know that, those people that are running that abortion mill know that.
That's
They
right.
know that, yeah.
They know that.
Right.
They do.
And so that's what, when you boil it all down, that's what this comes down to.
Yeah.
Is you cannot, if you're running an abortion clinic, you cannot allow dissent. Everybody has to be on the same page.
Yeah, and not only that, Mark, but what they really want to do is get the sidewalk counselors out of there. Because
Right.
once you get the sidewalk counselors out of there, the only people who can or who are going to be near it are the people who have to shout and yell, and that's what they want to portray our side as.
Right.
Well, and
Loud,
ultimately,
confrontational, obnoxious, scary people. They don't want the Gerald Turcos of the world out there because they don't fit in with the template that they've decided
Right.
Is what pro-lifers really are.
Well, and what they're doing is they're calling it bullying, but they're eliminating choice is what they're doing.
Right.
They're
Good point.
silencing actual options for women because as anyone who stood out on the sidewalk has seen time and again, a lot of these women are being coerced. You're watching them, a guy who has her arm grabbed and he's taking her in there. And this is truly another option for someone to come in and advocate for a woman who is being coerced into an abortion, who is being forced, who has no choice. You have peaceful sidewalk counselors out there who can call the police or assist the woman or find out if this really is truly her choice to go in there and offer her an alternative. And they want to take that choice away. So for them to be called the pro-choice side is absolutely heinous.
Well, choices, we've said it many times here, choice is a one-way street.
Yeah.
Abortion can be chosen, but it cannot be unchosen.
Right.
And that's what this all has come down to. Well, hey, Frank, thanks for joining us. And
Sure thing, Mark. Everybody else.
keep
good
us
to be with
posted.
you.
Keep us posted on how this is going. We want to follow this.
Will do.
And there'll be other ones out there, I'm sure.
Okay, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Well, the battle continues.
Battle continues.
Thank God for these kind of attorneys.
Unfortunately, again, we're out of time, but don't ever forget, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how this killing is going to stop. We'll see you next month.